Okay, so here I'm going to be talking about in this video, I'll be talking about master as emissary. Real purpose of the video is kind of two things. One, I want to talk a little bit more detail about the two paper options, which you can find here on the syllabus by clicking on this link. I'll do that in a second. The other purpose of this video is to just talk about some of the content in the introduction. I also want to point out real quick, looking at the syllabus, that the you have all these quizzes throughout the course of the semester regarding master as emissary. But the major assignment for this is the paper, 4 to 6 pages, which is due the last week of class. Right now, scheduled Wednesday of that last week of class. So looking at the paper options, you click on that link, it takes you here. You can kind of see the instructions. And I'm going to talk about these kind of right in the beginning of the video, and then I'll talk more about the content of the introduction of that very first chapter that you read in the book after that. So these are the two options, and I copied and pasted them into the slides, which are right here. And that's what I'm going to talk about first. So here's paper topic 1. This is the same words that are, if you click on that, the link in the syllabus, though here I've made some things bold to kind of emphasize some aspects of the paper, things that I'll be expecting if you choose paper option 1. So I'll kind of go through this. So the first thing you'll have to do for paper option 1 is choose a topic that both Gazzaniga in the textbook and McGilchrist in the Master as Emissary talk about. This is kind of a challenging aspect, is just choosing a good topic. And I'll just mention that I'm happy to talk to you guys as you're kind of brainstorming topics. I'll also be giving some ideas for potential topics here and in future versions of these videos. But you will need to choose a topic that both authors cover. And the topic, it's important that it contains some type of functional or cognitive component. So for instance, you cannot just do hemispheric differences in anatomical structure, but differences in anatomy between the left and right hemispheres, unless you somehow try and connect those anatomical differences between the left and right hemispheres to some type of functional or cognitive differences between the left and right hemispheres. So that talking about a topic which has a cognitive or functional component is important. And once again, I will be giving some examples throughout this. I'll give 1 or 2 examples, I believe, this video and then in future videos as well. So now getting into some of the actual content of the paper, the first thing you're going to want to do, the very first paragraph of the paper will be, say something like, the topic that I'm choosing is this, and then kind of describe or define, the relevant terms. That's really the first paragraph is just like, here's what I'm going to talk about. This is what the word means. Here are some relevant vocabulary terms that are relevant to this concept or this topic. And then the next paragraph would be right here, this first bold thing. You provide a description of the topic based on what's in the Gazzaniga textbook. So in the very first paragraph, you just say, this is my topic. Here, this is a term that's related to that topic, and here's how it's defined. Just whatever things you need to say in that first paragraph to kind of set the stage, give the basic introduction to what it is you're going to be talking about. Then that next paragraph, you're going to talk in a little bit more detail about this is what the textbook Gazzaniga says about this topic. That'll be a paragraph. That would be like your second paragraph. Then the third paragraph would be what McGilchrist says. Describe that topic from McGilchrist's perspective. Here's what McGilchrist says from the Master as Emissary about that same topic. That'd be like the third paragraph. And the fourth paragraph would be kind of comparing and contrasting the two authors or the two books regarding that topic. So for instance, one example, kind of a common example is both books talk about attention. And so you would say, you define the very first paragraph, I'm going to do my topic about attention. And here's a definition of attention. Maybe provide me an example or something of, an example of a person, using their attention. Then that next paragraph, you decide, here is what Gazzaniga says about attention. And this paragraph would be, here are some of the things that McGilchrist says about attention. And then right here in this paragraph, you talk about the similarities and differences. It turns out that there are some things that both authors talk about regarding attention in the textbook and in Master's Emissary, but there's definitely a lot of differences as well. McGilchrist in the Master's Emissary spends a whole lot more words and time talking about attention than Gazzaniga does. Like Master's Emissary talks about attention throughout this really long book, and McGilchrist does a whole lot of speculating about attention and a whole bunch of other topics as well, but I'm just giving one example right now, attention. McGilchrist's perspective, as I mentioned just now, it's pretty opinionated, speculative. He makes a lot of claims that are somewhat supported by scientific evidence, but I say they're opinionated and speculative because he oftentimes will make claims which go beyond the existing evidence. But nevertheless, you want to make sure that you are describing McGilchrist's speculations for whatever topic he's likely going to be speculating at. He takes all this stuff about the brain and he's speculating it by doing things like connecting these aspects of to the brain to something big picture stuff like Western society or like different clinical conditions. And so those are the kind of some of the speculations that you would want to talk about. When you're talking about these perspectives, you do want to include quotes with page numbers. When you're talking about McGilchrist's perspective in particular, his opinions, his speculations, support that with quotes. And give me some type of indication of where you got that quote from. At least I need to know what chapter it came from. It would be nice if I know whether it came from like the beginning, middle, or end of the chapter. If there's like a subsection within that chapter, that's very, very helpful. Like the chapter name and then the subsection within the chapter. If you're using a physical version of the book, you can also just say the page number. If you're using the e-versions of the book, the page numbers kind of differ depending on the version. So definitely for people who are reading electronic versions of the book, please tell me the chapter and maybe like the subsection within the chapter for each quote that you're using. And the reason I want these quotes is because I don't want, the book is very long and I want to be able to verify that the things that you are saying that McGilchrist speculates, the claims that he's making, that he actually does make those claims, that he actually is making the speculations that you are claiming he does. That's why I want quotes, especially from McGilchrist. I don't actually need quotes from Gazzaniga that much, but definitely quotes from McGilchrist because he's kind of opinionated and speculative. And then at the end of the paper, you would reflect on McGilchrist's perspective. Like, do you find his argument compelling? You know, if you're talking about attention, he makes all these claims. You know, there's the hemispheres differ in the way they attend to the world, and this has this implication for Western society. Do you agree with the implications that he makes about the role of attention and its implications for Western society? And then you want to support that with some type of a logical explanation. So I have some stuff in the notes here. I want to just go over it real quick. Yeah, so I want to kind of talk about the speculations a little bit more. Many of the things that McGilchrist speculates in The Master and His Emissary about are kind of the big picture themes of the book. So the big picture themes are oftentimes kind of based on scientific evidence, but then especially like claims that he makes about Western society, it's very difficult to make, you know, strong scientifically based claims about the way the evolution of the brain has influenced society. You can't like do randomized control scientific studies that really gather that type of information, at least not very easily. And so the things that a lot of these claims kind of fall more under, they're based once again on scientific evidence, but they're kind of in the speculation realm as well. And so that's when I'm talking about in this last phase right here, reflect on McGilchrist's perspective. Do you find it compelling? That's really what you'll be really focusing in on. There is scientific evidence that supports some of the claims he's making, but then he usually goes beyond the evidence. For those parts of the book where he's going beyond the evidence, I want you to be able to kind of notice these are the claims that go beyond the evidence. And then I want you to just basically provide a logical argument as to whether you agree or not. And I will mention, yeah, this is important too. When you're choosing a topic, it will be easiest for you if you are choosing a topic which is quite relevant to kind of the bigger picture themes. So there's a lot of stuff which goes on in the master and his emissary. Most of it is connected to kind of these bigger picture themes, but you definitely want to make sure when you're choosing a topic that you kind of have in your mind, okay, this topic is important because it connects to kind of this bigger picture theme in the master and his emissary. Because when you're talking about these McGilchrist perspective, his speculations, those usually have to do with kind of the bigger picture themes in the book. And your topic, you have to be able to connect your topic to McGilchrist's perspective and some of these bigger picture themes. So that's like an important part of the paper, choosing a topic which you can connect to some of these bigger picture themes in the book. And I guess I should define bigger picture theme in the book are those themes, those concepts which McGilchrist talks about repeatedly throughout the book. So he talks about, some things in this introduction, which I'll talk about here in a second, and then he'll talk about them in many subsequent chapters. In the introduction, it was kind of vague, but he gets much more specific and detailed information in subsequent chapters. And so they're kind of the bigger picture themes if they're things that he's kind of coming back to over and over and over again in the book. Moving on to paper option 2. So I'll kind of begin by contrasting this with paper option 1. Paper option 1, you have to pick a topic that both authors cover, and then you especially want to connect that topic to kind of the speculations and big picture ideas in the master and his emissary. Paper option 2, you don't really have to think as much about the big picture ideas in the master and his emissary. This one is more about kind of digging deeper into some of the claims that McGilchrist makes and actually reading the articles that he's using to make those claims. So this is kind of attempting to teach you skepticism. So the idea of skepticism, instead of just when someone makes a claim, instead of just believing it, you want to actually analyze or evaluate the evidence critically. And that's what you have to do for this paper option. So you're going to choose some topic about cognitive neuroscience from the master and his emissary. And you want to be clear about what that topic is. And that's probably what your very first paragraph is going to be about. And you also choose two studies or two studies / articles that McGilchrist makes when he's making a claim in the book about that topic. So an example is he might say something like, the left hemisphere is important for this type of attention. The right hemisphere is important for this other type of attention. And then he would provide articles, studies, citations that support that claim. And you will need to choose two articles. And a caveat, the articles need to be empirical. So that is, they need to present data. They shouldn't just be a review article or a purely theoretical article. They need to have like human or at least animal participants, which are measuring behavior or brain activity. There needs to be actual data presented in the article, an empirical article. If there is a review article which is cited in the master's emissary, you can talk or write about it, but it won't count as one of your two studies, with a couple exceptions. I will make some exceptions, but you would always have to get approval from me first. So in general, whatever claim McGilchrist makes in the book about cognitive neuroscience, you want to be able to find two empirical articles about that claim. And it can be two different claims it can be two different claims as long as the claims are related, and especially they have to be about the same topic. So once again, he'll make some claim like, the left hemisphere is important for this type of attention. The right hemisphere is important for this other type of attention. And then he'll cite articles. You need to be clear what articles you're going to be talking about. And you also need to be clear about what claims were made. So I want quotes again for this paper. Like you would quote, McGilchrist says on this chapter in this subsection, maybe provide me the page number. The left hemisphere is dominant in this type of attention. The right hemisphere is dominant in this type of attention. Here are the articles that McGilchrist cites in support of this claim. And then for each study or article that you cite out of those two, you will need to read it. You need to go use the library here at KU, and it can all be done online now. And read the articles, describe them, and then in the paper you'll describe the methods and then the findings. And you have to describe those in enough detail that you can evaluate, determine whether the claim or the claims that McGilchrist makes about those articles are justified. So McGilchrist says, I'm just giving the same example over and over again, the left hemisphere is important for blank kind of attention, the right hemisphere is important for this other type of attention. And you read the articles and then you need to discuss, are the claims that he's making about about hemispheric differences in attention, are they actually supported by the articles that he's citing? Do I agree that with the conclusions that the data in these articles are supporting the claims or the conclusion that McGilchrist is making about them? And so you will need to reflect on the quality of the studies. Do they actually show that the left hemisphere is important for blank kind of attention and the right hemisphere is important for this other type of attention? And you do need to cite the studies. It needs to be clear what they are and include a reference section. I don't really care about APA formatting for the reference section. It just has to be, I just need to know exactly what article. It needs to be not ambiguous at all what articles you're choosing, so that if I want to look at them, I can, and I can find them easily. So those are the two paper options. I'm happy to talk more about these if you have questions about them. I try to answer all the questions by talking about them. For this one, I also have some notes that you should take a look at right here. So I just wanted to talk about some big picture themes. This would probably be most helpful for paper option 1. Remember, paper option 1, you have to choose a topic that both authors cover. And then ultimately what you have to do is you have to connect that topic, you have to talk about it in terms of the speculations that McGilchrist makes. And ultimately, do you find those speculations convincing or not? And so it's kind of helpful to kind of think about what are some of the big picture themes, big picture concept in Master and His Emissary. You don't know that yet, really, because you haven't read the whole book. I've read it a whole bunch of times now, and so I kind of know. You have a hints because you've now read this introduction chapter, and he's kind of telling you what the big picture themes are, but you don't really understand them until they get reiterated and you start reading about the same idea, the same topics in future parts of the book. So probably one of the biggest big picture themes in the book is that there are functional differences between the two hemispheres, and that the differences are, and I'm quoting from the introduction, profound and significant. There are functional differences between the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and they're important for people to understand. And he thinks there's profound in the sense that these hemispheric differences have big influences on things like Western society and mental health, and maybe other things that I can't think of right now. But when he says profound, that's really what he means is, big implications for human behavior in Western society and, mental health. That's the mostly probably what he means by profound. I guess you'd say they're philosophically profound too, as far as like understanding our place in the universe and things like that. So kind of going into more details about this, one of the big picture ideas, there are hemispheric differences and they are important. One of the main goals, therefore, of the book is to kind of characterize the differences. There's all these differences between the left and right hemisphere, and McGilchrist wants to characterize them, say all the differences in the left hemisphere, all the characteristics of the left hemisphere reflect kind of this, and all the characteristics of the right hemisphere, they kind of reflect this other thing. And so kind of accurately trying to characterize all of these isolated facts about the right hemisphere, characterize all these different facts about the left hemisphere, and kind of make sense about them. Like what do all these different things about the left hemisphere mean about the overall way of characterizing the left hemisphere? Similarly, for the right hemisphere. And he mentions in the introduction, once again, he mentions that doing this, accurately characterizing the left and right hemisphere, he's going to talk about a whole lot of different types of evidence: neurology, psychology, philosophy, literature, the arts, archaeology, anthropology. This book covers a lot of these things. And that's why if you actually look at the syllabus, I mentioned that one of the goals is for this class is to get an appreciation for the interdisciplinary nature of cognitive neuroscience. And that comes mostly from this book, where kind of the central evidence is cognitive neuroscience. But he does kind of make these speculations. And he also evaluates evidence that's coming from all of these, different fields of study: neurology, psychology, philosophy, literature, the arts, archaeology, anthropology. They're all kind of connected in this book to cognitive neuroscience. So interdisciplinary, you should get a kind of an appreciation and a perspective on how these different fields are kind of connected to each other. Another big picture theme, the hemispheres are supposed to cooperate. They're supposed to work. They're different, but they're supposed to work together. They each have their strengths and weaknesses, but ultimately they're supposed to work together to help the person. But what he says is that, and this is, kind of a speculation, but what he says is they're involved in kind of like a power struggle. And that this power struggle is kind of explains and is important to understanding aspects of our Western culture. In the United States, we are definitely in Western culture. Western Europe and, this hemisphere of the world, would be considered, Western culture. And here's a quote. The most fundamental difference between the hemispheres lies in the type of attention they give to the world. So this is a quote from this introduction section, and it's a quote which reflects kind of, it's a lot of the stuff in future chapters are where he's basically unpacking this claim with kind of detailed analysis of studies and articles. He makes the claim basically in this chapter, the left and right hemispheres are different. They're really important, profound differences. It's really fundamental. And the thing which is different, kind of the crucial difference, is the fact the left and right hemispheres, they pay attention to the world in different ways. And then the way he attempts to characterize the left, I told you one of the big goals of this is to accurately characterize the differences between the left and right hemispheres. The way he kind of does that is by characterizing the attentional tendencies of each hemisphere. The left hemisphere tends to attend to things in this way. The right hemisphere tends to attend to things in this other way. And then he says that these different types of attention can actually alter the world out, they can alter society. So the hemispheres attend to the world in different ways. The ways they can attend to the world then can make it's the different attentional tendencies of the left and right hemispheres can then influence the world that you are a part of. So these are some of the big picture themes of the book. And when you're choosing a topic, if you're choosing option one, you want to choose a topic that you can kind of connect to some of these big picture ideas. That's like kind of the signature of a decent topic for option one. Choose a topic about cognition that both authors cover, and it's a topic which in your mind you can kind of connect to some of these bigger picture ideas in The Master and His Emissary. So here is some more examples of bigger picture themes from Master and His Emissary. He talks about, and this is kind of related to this one right here, the hemispheres are in a power struggle. They're supposed to cooperate, but they're in a power struggle. And he definitely views the left hemisphere, he's kind of scared of it. He likes the right hemisphere a lot. He's kind of sketched out by the left hemisphere. And this is the left hemisphere is dependent but parasitic on the right hemisphere. That's a pretty close quote from this introduction chapter. The left hemisphere needs the right hemisphere, but it's kind of a parasite on the right hemisphere. And the left hemisphere has become increasingly unopposed by the right hemisphere. So the right hemisphere, he says, originally was kind of supposed to keep the left hemisphere in check. But the left hemisphere has kind of grown in power and influence. And so now the right hemisphere has kind of been dwarfed by the left hemisphere. And he thinks the left hemisphere's attentional style is kind of dominant, both in individual people's minds, but then out in the way it influences the world. He says our society is basically Western society, Western culture has been influenced by the fact that our left hemisphere has kind of is very, very powerful. And so it influences our kind of attentional way that we think about, things, but it also influences the structure of the society that we find ourselves a part of. Some more things about the left hemisphere. It's unaware of its dependence on the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere, so this is like the big picture theme, and then here's some of the specific things he says about it, and he's going to go throughout the book. He's going to provide evidence for a lot of these claims in more detail in future parts of the book. The left hemisphere is unaware of the fact that it relies on the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is so self-confident, it's like a little bit strange or off-putting, at least to McGilchrist. He says the left hemisphere creates a self-reflexive virtual world. The left hemispheres kind of has this approach or attentional state, which makes that produces a world which is mechanistic, fragmented, and decontextualized. So right now, these things might not mean a lot. Mechanistic, fragmented, decontextualized. Like throughout the course of the book, you want to understand what these terms mean and why he thinks the left hemisphere has these characteristics. Right now, he's just using these kind of vague terms, but he definitely provides more specific examples as we read the book. Another thing he says about the left hemisphere is it dichotomizes, it loves to categorize, especially compared to the right hemisphere. So, this is kind of, this whole thing is about kind of the way the left hemisphere is become powerful compared to the right hemisphere. And here are some of the specific kind of traits of the left hemisphere. And then throughout the book, he'll kind of reiterate a lot of these things, which are in the introduction, kind of vaguely stated, but they'll become more detailed throughout the course of the book. So the last thing I did want to talk a little bit about a potential topic for option 2. So he says in the introduction, this is just an example of a potential topic for option 2. He says in the introduction that abnormal patterns of hemispheric lateralization could contribute to several different clinical conditions, such as schizophrenia, dyslexia, bipolar disorder, and he says even homosexuality. And at this point in the book, he's not really citing any of these claims, he makes these claims, but he's not really providing citations or evidence in support of them yet. Later in the book, for some of these claims, he'll say them again, and then he'll attempt to provide evidence in support of them. And if you recall, for option 2, paper option 2, you're supposed to find a claim that McGilchrist makes that's related to cognitive neuroscience, read articles that he provides in support of that claim, and then determine whether you agree with the claim that he makes or the claims that he makes using those articles that he cited. And this stuff up here is like unambiguously controversial. Gazzaniga, for instance, has been on record saying that he does not think that hemispheric lateralization is that important to schizophrenia. To me, it seems quite controversial that you would say that sexual orientation will be related to hemispheric lateralization. And so like these claims, like when you hear them, they might kind of rub you the wrong way, or you might just be like, I'm not for sure I buy that. These, if you read the book and that kind of thing is happening to you, you're like, I don't know, this doesn't sound right. What you want to do is find the parts in later chapters where he's making these specific claims and provide citations. And then you're going to unpack, you're going to read those citations, read those studies, read the articles. And then, especially if it's something you just don't believe it, and you read the articles, you're like, no, this doesn't make, his claims are wrong given the articles then you have the opportunity to make an argument against what he's saying. So yeah, you want to pay attention to some of these claims in later chapters. Like, these types of things would be the perfect type of claim, saying, he says things like schizophrenia is caused by an overactive left hemisphere, and then provide some articles. Read those articles and decide if you agree with them. So pay attention as you're reading for subsequent chapters. Yeah, and then if there's a claim that doesn't sit well with you, that's a potential option number 2 right there. So that's all I have for this. I'm definitely happy to talk any ideas you have or answer any questions about this. I hope it's helpful. Let me know if you want to chat.